What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, this week we do have the big PlayStation showcase to look forward to, but last week, Jim Ryan did an interview where he talked about a number of different things in the PlayStation ecosystem. One part had to do with PC games and if they'd ever come out right next to their PlayStation 5 counterpart, and, well, his answer certainly set the internet off. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about a rather strange update that kind of came out of nowhere for Nintendo Switch Online with a bunch of Game Boy Advance games dropping in this week. And we'll also be talking about Mortal Kombat 1, as there was a bit of a leak online that, well, you're going to want to see some of these characters. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps that a ton. And if new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with an update for the Pokemon Home and Scarlet and Violet situation, as previously they announced that it would be live through an update. That would be May 23rd and 24th, but now they've had to kind of backtrack on that. This was posted up over on Twitter, where they say, earlier we mistakenly posted that Pokemon Home version 3.0.0 would launch on May 23rd and 24th. However, the actual release date is yet to be announced. 3.00 is coming soon, though. So please continue to follow our pages for more information. Everyone was trying to figure out what happened here, and I mean, who knows at this point with the Pokemon Company, Game Freak. At times you look at them and it's incredible how well they do with some of these games, with some of these events that take place. This one being the latest, and one, it's already strange because it's taken, what, 6 months for home compatibility to come to Scarlet and Violet, and when they finally announced it, some of the fans have been waiting a while for, they had to then pull it back. So hopefully it's like, oh, it's the following week, and maybe they found something with the update, or there was a miscommunication, and really it's like the first week of June. So I guess we'll keep up to date with this, and I'll let you guys know when they re-announce the release date for Home and Scarlet and Violet. Also, we had a bit of an anniversary over the weekend. It's an anniversary that Xbox is still trying to recover from, which, take a look here, this over from the Game Awards, and many Twitter accounts started tweeting about this. 10 years ago today, Xbox revealed the Xbox One at a special event on the Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington. There's Don Matrick, of course, showing off the Xbox One with the Kinect and talking about DRM and used games. You need to go through checks, and you gotta always be online with the system, and it wasn't great for the Xbox brand, and it's something that still haunts them to this day. Remember, Phil Spencer, in that kind of funny interview, mentioned they lost that generation. It was the worst one to lose because people built their digital library, and Sony, they just kind of had to show up and not trip over their own shoelaces, and they were fine, right? Like, they even twisted the knife a bit with that infamous commercial or that ad where they just handed one game to the other. That's how you share your games, because Xbox, it was still not very clear, and then if you don't have internet connection, they got a system for you, the Xbox 360. So certainly an infamous event to look back on, but 10 years. It is also hard to believe it's been that long since the Xbox fell over itself on stage. Oh, and it looks like we may have got an accidental hint or tease as to when Alan Wake 2 is at least planned to come out. We could see this post up as transcribed by IGN, and this is from Monsters, Madness, and Magic, where a voice actor for Alan Wake 2 says, "I've been working on it. That's supposed to come out in October. We're in the middle of working on it now. In fact, I was just in Finland last week. That's where the company is from, Remedy. They're amazing people." Now, as he went on to talk about Alan Wake 2, kept saying, oh, it's under NDA. I can't say this, I can't say that. And then they said previously, oh, it's coming out in October, I think. They haven't announced that yet. And I mean, Summer Game Fest right around the corner seems like a good spot. I mean, you could even look at PlayStation Showcase as a third-party offering during the showcase. Say, hey, Alan Wake 2 is out in October or just in the fall or holiday 2023. But that's exciting stuff, obviously, for Alan Wake fans, that we could see this game coming out in the next 6 months. So we'll have to find out either the PlayStation Showcase this week or Summer Games Fest in a couple of weeks, start off June. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo Switch Online and a bunch of Game Boy Advance games that kind of just got announced out of nowhere. And when I say out of nowhere, it was really out of nowhere, because these were games that were not even mentioned when they talked about some of the future additions to the service. Because if you remember, they announced Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games, and then they scrolled through a selection of titles that would eventually find their way to the platform platform. We assumed in the coming months, this was basically going to be the order of the different titles. But we can see this posted up over on Nintendo of America on Twitter. So on May 18th, so again, like 9 o'clock at night Eastern, there's, hey, Super Mario Advance, Super Mario World, Super Mario Advance 2, and Yoshi's Island, Super Mario Advance 3 are all coming to Nintendo Switch for Nintendo Switch Online Plus Expansion Pack members on May 26th. So a little later on this week, all 3 of these will be dropping in. And this is it's a fun addition. The only thing that's kind of strange about this is we already have access to the games that these games are based off of on the Nintendo or the Super Nintendo, and there are some changes here and there, but it's nothing major. I mean, if you look at Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Bros. 3, that had the e-reader levels, and there's like 30-something levels there. That's pretty good in terms of extra content, whereas these are more or less catered to the Game Boy Advance's smaller screen for some of the different levels. They did have different effects, and there are messages and other things that they altered and like for endings and that sort of thing. But for the most part, they're the same games. Now, I will say there's a lot of nostalgia here. Even for me, like with the Game Boy Advance, it was pretty cool to see a lot of these Super Nintendo games go to a portable system. And that is kind of the feeling we were getting with the Switch, especially early on in its life, where Doom, oh, that's a portable game now, Wolfenstein. And right, I know they didn't look as good as their console counterparts like the PlayStation or Xbox, but it was still cool to have that in the palm of your hands and just take it where you want. And that was sort of a feeling we were getting at that time with the Game Boy Advance when we started to realize that it was more or less capable of what the Super Nintendo was doing with, again, minor alterations because, for example, the screen was smaller, so certain titles that relied on a more zoomed out view, they had to kind of play around with it a bit, and these titles are no exception. But I guess the really cool thing is we're not necessarily going by that schedule they placed in front of us with the different games that we're scrolling by. We're still waiting for Metroid Zero Mission, Golden Sun, we have Fire Emblem in there, and maybe that's something that people are pointing to. It's like, well, I'd rather have had Golden Sun as opposed to Game Boy Advance ports of Super Nintendo games that we already had on the service, but if anything, it's just more content, I guess, filling out that Game Boy Advance section. And again, it makes me think that we could just have random titles dropped in at any time, even if they're not on that list of games that we're expecting to show up. But because we've already had these games on the service and these are just ports of those titles, still seems like kind of a strange update. But I am looking forward to the day that they announce that Pokemon trading card game is going into the Nintendo Switch Online service on the Game Boy side, because it's a fun game for me, a lot of nostalgia there, and I'm looking forward to actually playing through it again on the Switch. And it'd be nice if they went back and grabbed the Pokemon card game 2, because there was a sequel to it. It just never found its way outside of Japan. Nintendo wants to translate it and bring that over, that'd be great. Not really holding my breath for it, but still, that's the one I'm really looking forward to. But interesting to see that we could have Game Boy Advance, Game Boy games just kind of pop up out of nowhere. Next up, let's talk about Jim Ryan and his interview with Famitsu. And we had to have this mostly translated, so I do recognize there may be some meanings or things lost in translation. However, there are parts of this that are pretty straightforward for the most part as to what he's trying to say. And the big thing that seemed to set the internet off last week, to end the week really, had to do with PlayStation 5 and PC ports of those first-party titles, because there has sort of been this lagging time frame where a game will release on the PS5, then a year, 2 years later even, it'll come out on PC. Now, some titles, it has continued to shrink down a bit, as we saw with Last of Us Part 1, but we also saw the quality of that PC port. However, Jim Ryan did talk about this a bit with Famitsu, and we can see this posted up, this translated by IGN, where he says, "We also fully understand the importance of PS5 exclusive titles. As I mentioned earlier, PlayStation Studios' main responsibility is to make games for the latest PlayStation hardware that players will enjoy. We are increasing the number of PS5 exclusive games and staggering the release of the PC versions." He does go on to say, "I often have the opportunity to ask game fans for their opinions, and when I ask them how they feel about the time lag, they often say they feel the release of a PC version 2 or 3 years after the release of the PlayStation version is acceptable." I assume he's not asking PC gamers for that opinion, because I mean, obviously they want the games sooner rather than later. And this is kind of strange because Herman Holst also talked about this and said, I think we have a good cadence right now, and it makes sense for what Sony wants to do. They're walking this tightrope where they basically want 3 releases for one game. They want to put it out on the PS5 as standard, PS5 exclusive, buy our console to play our games. And then they want to move it over to PC a couple of years later after the initial sales on console slow down. And then they also want to put it on their subscription service with PlayStation Plus to get people to sign up because maybe they held off on buying it for $70 in 08. Now it's on PlayStation Plus Extras for $100 a year. But the door that Hermen Hulst left open was the live service games probably going to PC and PlayStation 5 on the same day. So you'll probably still see that happen, most likely even at this PlayStation showcase coming up, but the single-player narrative-driven experiences that Sony has prided themselves on is probably gonna go along with that 3-stage release, with PlayStation 5 console exclusive, PC years later, and then into their PlayStation Plus extra premium tier, or however they want to handle it. Because to them, that's at least working now and still kind of remains on their more quote-unquote hardware-first traditional side that they've come up with since the PS1. So if you've been following this show for any length of time, none of this should surprise you, but Jim Ryan did talk about PSVR 2, which a lot of people have wondered, is that doing well? I mean, we haven't really heard a lot about it. It sounds like we're going to see some PSVR 2 games this week during that showcase, but Sony hasn't exactly rushed out to talk about sales numbers or really talk about the headset at all. Well, Jim Ryan was asked about this. We can see posted up this over on Push Square, where he says PSVR 2 has just been launched, so it may be a little early to judge its popularity, but we are happy to see many positive reactions from users and the media. All right, so that's not exactly an overly confident statement on PSVR 2, saying it's too early to judge its popularity. I mean, Sony, I'm sure, had realistic expectations for this headset because it is VR, so it's already a limited audience, and it is harder to sell a headset that is more expensive than the console for a smaller pool of titles that supports that headset, and I'm sure they understand it's basically their job to push this headset with software, and that's what we're going to see with the showcase coming up. So, step one, obviously, getting the headset produced, getting it to market. It's now showing up in stores, so they got to start showing some more games, and here's hoping this week we see some large ones. Next up, let's talk about Mortal Kombat 1, which was an exciting reveal last week. Other than it just being a CGI trailer, I'm at least interested in the direction for the story and how they work to reboot several of the characters and the universe itself. But there is one thing we usually can count on with Mortal Kombat, and there's some out of the blue, certainly interesting DLC characters that come from all over pop culture. They've done a lot. And we had a leak from Amazon for the premium edition of this game. And I guess I should warn you, technically spoilers for people who want to be surprised, but I do think that they're just going to announce all of them at once for the premium edition because it was just listed on Amazon. But there are timestamps down below, so I'll give you a minute. If you want to skip past this part, feel free to. Again, it should be down the bar. If it's not down there, for some reason, YouTube's been weird and it doesn't actually section it off, go down in the description and you'll see a list of the timestamps. Just click on to the next topics. That should be enough time. Let's go to the list. This over on GameSpot. Yeah, we're going to go line by line. Quan Chi, Omni-Man, Ermac, Peacekeeper, Takeda, and Homelander. Okay, so Peacemaker sure is like, okay, that's kind of out there, but like Omni-Man and Homelander. So Omni-Man is from Invincible, which is an awesome show, by the way. I'm looking forward to the next season. It's really exciting stuff, especially if you're at all familiar with the story in the comics. It's going to get pretty wild with everything going on there. And then Homelander's from The Boys. Again, this isn't necessarily new for Mortal Kombat to look outside of even video games, and like Predator's been in there, Freddy Krueger, right? Like Omni-Man though and Homelander, that could be really cool because these appear to be playable characters. We know there's like cameo characters and playable characters. They've separated those. So at first I saw these. I said, oh, well, they're probably cameos. They'll have assists of some kind. They'll show up. Maybe Homelander will like eye laser somebody or you'll have Peacemaker walk in and punch or shoot someone with a gun, something like that. No, they're going to be just, you're going to pick them in the character select screen and play through parts of the game with them. So I'm like immediately thinking of movesets, fatalities. That's like a big one there. But I really like the start of this because if this is the initial wave of DLC, Like, it makes me think of what other wild and wacky ideas they come up with for sort of the roadmap of downloadable content and characters they will continue to add. Because if we're starting with Omni-Man and Homelander, who knows where they're going to take this thing. But again, this was leaked out through Amazon, so we'll have to wait and see when they're ready to actually announce and reveal this, because if they just announce all of it at once, we'll be seeing Homelander and Omni-Man a bit sooner than we were expecting. And in our last bit of news, I want to quickly touch on something that is going to be happening a lot this week, and that has to do with just fake leaks around the PlayStation Showcase and the Xbox Showcase. We are starting to get into what would typically be E3 season or E3 preseason, right? Basically the last week or so of May going into June, you start to see rumors and speculation, leaks get thrown around a lot. And well, take a look at this one here just as an example. The PlayStation Showcase, where it's all just typed up nice, neatly, all just a bunch of lines of the different studios. And this gained quite a bit of traction online. I mean, some of it, okay, yeah, Last of Us Factions, Spider-Man 2, obviously, Metal Gear Solid, but then the list just goes on and on, and it just looks ridiculous overall. But the best one is the Xbox Showcase leaked. This is they went above and beyond. Has confidential sideways printed on, a little bit of transparency there for the background. They have Avowed, they have Starfield, they have Hollow Knight Slick Song. I mean, it's just incredible, compelling stuff here. Again, you're going to see a lot of these pop up where people are just making them to kind of troll the internet. You'll see them mostly get posted to places like 4chan or just different forums, and then it'll find its way to Twitter, and people will kind of pass it around and pull things from it. And of course, expectations already built up, especially around the PlayStation Showcase, but they can take it to the next level because, hey, eventually they got to announce Bloodborne, I think, right? Maybe that's what Bluepoint's doing, or maybe no one's doing Bloodborne, but I'm sure that'll show up on more and more of these lists as we go along. Just remember, if you see these different lists circulating out there and it's not blurry like they ran through the conference room trying to snap a picture, it's probably not real. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I asked, if Sony first-party games went to PS5 and PC day one, which platform would you primarily buy and play the games on? 60% say PS5, 40% say PC. And I do still think that for the most part, the PS5 version of the game would outsell the PC version. There's just a lot of people who buy the PS5 console specifically to play these first-party titles. And I mean, if you look at their recent offering on PC with The Last of Us Part 1, may have lost some confidence in how good some of these ports will be. And maybe they'll work to regain some of that confidence and trust at the showcase coming up, because I think they'll announce at least one PC port. I'm thinking either Ratchet and Clank or maybe Ghost of Tsushima, but either way, it's something that Sony is still trying to figure out how to navigate right now when it comes to PlayStation 5 exclusivity and then porting it to PC down the road, or same day if it's a live service. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Arata says, a new Mortal Kombat, a new Street Fighter, and a new Tekken within the same year. Competition will be tough on fighting games. So we're still waiting to see exactly when Tekken is coming out. But there have been talks that it could sneak into 2023, I guess, or it'd be early 2024. I hope it does come out in 2023 and it makes the cutoff for the Game Awards, because that'd be a pretty good card, right? You have Street Fighter 6, you have Mortal Kombat 1, and then you have Tekken 8. Significantly better than when they had to basically shove Jump Force in there and give them the right to say Jump Force Fighting Game nominee of the year. But that would be a very compelling lineup for the fighting game of the year. And honestly, hard to say who would take it, because these games also play and control much different than one another, but definitely a good year, at least from what we're seeing now, if Tekken 8 makes it in for fighting game fans. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talk about here today, where there's the Game Boy Advance games heading into the Nintendo Switch Online service this week. Were you disappointed to see all of these Mario games go in there, or were you excited because you got hit with a wave of nostalgia? And then also, what about Jim Ryan talking about PC ports from these PS5 exclusive games? Do you think that gap will continue to narrow, or will they really keep it to a 2 to 3 year cadence from release on the PS5 to PC? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.